Hi, welcome to another Tech Talk. Today I'd like to talk about permission boundaries in AWS, what they are, what they can be used for, how they're used, and then we'll jump into a demo showing exactly how a permission boundary can be used. So let's go. Okay, so what is a permission boundary? A permission boundary is a policy set applied to an IAM user or role. They are a way of restricting the maximum possible permissions an IAM policy can have. It's basically a permission boundary. It's an advanced feature for using managed policy to set the maximum permission that an identity-based policy can grant to an IAM identity. So in this instance, we have an identity-based policy, which is assigned to a user. We also have a permissions boundary assigned to a user. So whatever permissions are set in the permission boundary is the maximum permissions that the user can actually have within their identity-based policy. So we can see here that we have 3 permissions that match up between the identity-based policy and the permission boundary. So therefore, that is the permission that the user will have. The identity-based policy obviously has another permission outside of the boundary, allowing the user to perform an activity in AWS. But because that particular permission is not allowed in the permission boundary, even though this user has permission to use it, they'll be denied. So it's a little bit of a hard concept to get your head around, but we'll jump into a scenario and then we'll look at an actual demo and look at it live and in use. So in this instance, we have a user. The user has a policy that allows full control of S3, RDS, EC2, and IAM. Now, obviously, having a user that's got full control over IAM is not a great, very secure. They could elevate their own privileges. They could affect other users' privileges, or they could, in fact, create new users or another user with elevated privileges. So therefore, you really want to restrict. You want to restrict who has that control over your IAM users. So in this scenario, let's say someone accidentally added the IAM user full control to this user's policy. Could possibly be human error. But over here, the same user has a permission boundary set to it. And I know this is a little bit hard to see, but I'll show you in the demo. But this permission boundary is saying that to only allow S3, EC2, and RDS full access. So in this instance, because the permission boundary is not allowing full IAM access, that means that even though this user their user policy has IAM access, that will actually be blocked and not allowed by the permission boundary. And the user will only have S3, RDS, and EC2 because that's what's allowed in the permission boundary, and that's what they also have permission to in their policy. Okay, so here we are in the AWS console. So I'm logged in as an admin user, which has access to IAM. So we'll jump in here. Okay, so this is the user that we were showing in the previous slide. So this user has a policy attached to it currently. The policy, it's a developer, so he's got a developer policy attached. And in this policy, if we have a look at this policy itself, we can see here this developer policy has S3, EC2, RDS, and IAM full access to all resources. Currently, there are no permission boundaries set for this user. So let's see what this user can get access to. Okay, great. So you can now see that I'm logged in as user 1. So let's jump into EC2. So the policy said they had full access to EC2. So as you can see here, we've got access to EC2. We can launch instances and everything else. All right, now let's go to IAM. So remember the user policy said that the user has full access to IAM, right? Okay, look at this. Users, policies, IAM. So in this instance, if the user, because the user has full access of IAM, they could actually remove my permissions, upgrade their permissions to admin, and in theory, take over the account. Just because someone accidentally put or didn't know what they were doing, or maybe they only needed certain permissions in IAM, like the user to update their own password, and they got a bit lazy and just decided to give it full access. All right, so how do we stop this from happening? All right, so we're back in as the admin. If I go into users, now remember I said that you could apply these permission boundaries directly to users or directly to groups as well. In this instance, we're just going to create a permission boundary to assign to a user. So let's go, we'll create a policy first. So as you can see here, here's the one that I already created, and it's the user permission boundary. So this user permission boundary policy is saying only allow S3, EC2, and RDS full access. Okay, so let's go back to the user. We will now, in the user settings, we'll now come down here and let's add a permission boundary for this user. So I went to load, and then if we look for, oops, permission boundary. So there is my permission boundary policy. Let's set the boundary. Okay, so we now have a permission boundary set. So just remember here, the policy that's attached to the user is allowing S3, EC2, RDS, and IAM full access. And the permission boundary is only allowing S3, EC2, and RDS access. Okay, so here we are. We're back logged in as the user one, which had the developer policy. So let's check our access now. So remember previously we had access to EC2 and S3. So let's check this. Yes, we have full access to EC2, which is great. Now remember previously, because the user policy assigned to the user one was allowing IAM full access. Therefore, they could potentially do some nasty things with permissions. But then we went and applied the permission boundary. Now, remember, the permission boundary allows the maximum level of permissions that can be applied to an IAM policy. It doesn't matter what the IAM policy is stating. So now, the policy that we put in only allowed access to S3, RDS, and EC2. And it didn't allow access to IAM. So now, if we navigate to IAM, let's have a look and see what happens. There we go. You don't have permissions. So this is the permission boundary taking effect. So that's, it makes it a bit easier to understand seeing a demo like this. But that's basically, at a very high level, how permission boundaries work. You can obviously get a lot more granular, assign them to groups automatically, etc. So thanks for watching. I hope I've been able to teach you something new today, and take care. I'll see you next time.